Hello, my friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family. So, guys, I want to talk about Edgar Cayce. We have talked about him a lot, and many of us might not realize just how much everything that is going on in the Earthchanges world is really influenced by what he saw, his prophecies, his visions. And so, since 1931, Edgar Cayce's ARE, the Association for Research and Enlightenment Incorporated, has been a resource for spiritual development, holistic health, and mindful living. So who was Edgar Cayce? He was an average individual. He was born in 1877, died in 1945 in most respects. Yet, throughout his life, he manifested one of the most remarkable psychic talents of all time. While in a trance-like state, he could answer questions or give accurate discourses on any topic. These discourses, called readings, numbered more than 14,000, and they were transcribed as he spoke. Given the name and location of an individual anywhere in the world, Cayce could correctly describe a person's physical condition and outline a holistic approach to his or her treatment. Eventually, the scope of Cayce's readings expanded to include such subjects as astrology and planetary influences, philosophy, dreams, and their meaning, ancient civilizations, the missing years of Jesus, soul growth, psychic development, prophecy, and reincarnation. So he was quite a talent, quite an amazing man, really fascinating life. And here you see a picture of a younger Edgar Cayce, who happens to look a lot like one of my uncles, who is also a great guy. And so he's been called the sleeping prophet and the father of holistic medicine, and the most documented psychic of the 20th century. And for more than 40 years of his adult life, he gave these readings. Literally thousands, as we had said, 14,000 readings. That's a lot of readings. Do you think if it was all, way off, complete bunk, nothing to it, he would have been able to give 14,000 readings and have grown to have such a following? So he was born in a farm in Hopkinsville, Kentucky in 1877. His psychic abilities began to appear as early as childhood. He was able to see and talk to his late grandfather's spirit and often played with imaginary friends who he said were spirits on the other side. He also displayed an uncanny ability to memorize the pages of a book simply by sleeping on it. These gifts labeled the young Cayce as strange, but all Cayce really wanted was to help others, especially children. Later in life, he would find that he had the ability to put himself into a sleep-like state by lying down on a couch, closing his eyes, and folding his hands over his stomach. In this state of relaxation and meditation, he was able to place his mind in contact with all time and space, the universal consciousness, also known as the superconscious mind. From there, he could respond to questions as broad as, what are the secrets of the universe? What is my purpose in life? To as specific as, what can I do to help my arthritis? And how were the pyramids of Egypt built? His responses to these questions became called readings, and their insights offer practical help and advice to individuals even today. Many people are surprised to learn that Edgar Cayce was a devoted churchgoer and a Sunday school teacher. At a young age, Cayce vowed to read the Bible for every year of his life, and at the time of his death in 45, he had accomplished this task. Perhaps the readings said it best when asked how to become psychic. Cayce's advice was to become more spiritual. And there is a difference between being religious and being spiritual, as most of us understand. So, tools for wellness, spiritual growth, and personal empowerment. Although Cayce died more than 60 years ago, 70 years ago now plus, the timelines of the material in the readings with subjects like discovering your mission in life, developing your intuition, exploring ancient mysteries, and taking responsibility for your health is evidenced by the hundreds of books that have been written on the various aspects of this work, as well as the dozens or so titles focusing on its life itself. Together, these books contain information so valuable that even Edgar Cayce himself might have hesitated to predict their impact on the contemporary world. In 1945, the year of his passing, who could have known that terms such as meditation, spiritual growth, auras, soulmates, and holistic health would become household words? And just think about that. Think about how far we've come. And so a lot of these things, which, in some people's minds, they would be viewed as quote unquote new age, and just talking to demons and spirits, we have to realize that's all conditioning. And that's conditioning done, quite honestly, by the powers that be, that want to keep people away from being able to discover that we're living in a matrix that is basically locking us down into just a smaller range of perceptibility, and it's keeping us away from knowing our true potential, our true abilities. Why would the CIA do studies on psychic abilities like they've done? Why would they have teams of remote viewers that actually are spying on the Russians and the Chinese? And the Russians and the Chinese have the same. They have people that are psychic, remote viewers. And we could all be trained. Some have more ability than others, but we can all be trained to do these things to a degree. And so, the militaries of the world have seen the value and recognized the validity of this. And in other videos, I have given you links to CIA documents that come right out saying, yes, this is real. And there's no way around it. It's real. People have these abilities, and especially in these times, these abilities are awakening in more people than ever. Where Cayce was somebody that was specially gifted, especially for that time, I bet you there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people that are even more gifted today around the world that are able to do the same or better, even more accurately. And that is because the veil is thinning. We are being bombarded, as we've said many, many times, with more cosmic rays because we're in a pole shift. The magnetosphere is in decline, and our DNA is changing because of this. And as the CIA studies show, we are all becoming more intuitive, more psychic every day. So really, we are in a period of great change, which Cayce did see. Now, the vast majority of those 14,000 readings that he did were all about holistic health and the treatment of illness. It was mostly people coming to him with physical ailments that doctors were not able to cure, and he was able to help people many, many, many times. But other readings ended off on different topics. Now, some view that he tapped into what we would call the Akashic records. And basically, these are like transcripts of everything that's ever happened in our reality, and perhaps in other realities as well. And it's pretty fascinating to go into this. But the reality is, we could all tap into these things if we're trained, and if we have an opened up enough mind, and we have dedication. And then there are people that are so gifted that they don't even need any training. They just simply can't tap in. But basically, you could narrow down what he talked about into 5 categories: health-related information, philosophy and reincarnation, dreams and dream interpretation, ESP and psychic phenomena, and spiritual growth, meditation, and prayer. And yes, he was a very, very spiritual person as well. So when we're looking at it, and we say we've had our training in philosophy, and we have read the works of Carl Jung, he talked about the conscious mind is your waking mind, then you have the subconscious mind, then the unconscious mind, then the collective consciousness. And so when we're tapping down into the deepest levels, we're going down into the collective unconsciousness, which, you could interpret as having direct conversations with God, source, whatever you want to word it. Again, those are all words, which are semantics, and they're ways of just stating something. So in addition to our immediate consciousness, which is thoroughly personal in nature, there exists a second psychic system of a collective, universal, and impersonal nature, which is identical in all individuals. We all could tap into this. And it's pretty fascinating. So here's off of in5d.com, which is a really cool site, and also a good YouTube channel as well. It's run by a gentleman named Greg, who is down in Sarasota, Florida, one of my old neighbors. And so the top 10 Edgar Cayce predictions. Many of Edgar Cayce's predictions have already come to fruition. Now, let me preface this by saying, too, though, that a lot of his, time-wise, have been off. And we'll get into that in bigger detail as we go on. But many of the predictions that he made time-wise, the time scale was off. Although you do get from so many people that do this, intuitive, psychics, really gifted people, time is a tough thing to pen down. It's a very tough thing to give exact dates. And the other thing is, what he really stressed, is that we have power over the future. And our consciousness can change, delay, it could really transform our world. So perhaps the delays are a good thing. And a lot of what we're seeing now happen are things that he had predicted would happen many years ago already. But now they are starting to happen. So we could take hope in that perhaps we could alleviate some of the things that are to come. And perhaps we could delay some things, perhaps we could change some things as well. So many of his predictions have already come to fruition. Cayce, also known as the Sleeping Prophet, correctly predicted the stock market crashed. And he did predict the Great Depression of 1929, also the beginning of World War II, and many earth changes in modern times. So here's a list of some of the more startling and memorable Edgar Cayce predictions. The greater portion of Europe will be changed in the twinkling of an eye. Japan will eventually go into the sea. Land will appear off the east coast of America. And there's a video there for you guys, a couple of videos for you to look at. There will be a shifting of the poles, which we know is something that's in the process right now, the magnetic reversal. And so there will be a shifting of the poles so that once where there was a cold climate will become warmer, and the semi-tropical will become the more tropical. Moss and ferns and new foliage will grow in places that seem strange to us now. As Cayce said, the earth is catching up with time. And haven't we been talking about the desert blooming now? And perhaps the deserts are going to bloom permanently in some locations, as they're going to become fertile areas. There will come a time when the sun will be darkened, and this will signify a spiritually awakening event. The city of Atlantis will be found near Bimini, and this is, of course, the famous Bimini Road over towards the Bahamas that we've talked about in that whole area. It will be discovered that there are healing powers in the waters off of Bimini, and quartz crystals will be recognized for their healing properties to uplift, empower, and synchronize many types of energy, such as light and electricity. And so, back in, say, the 40s and 30s, the thoughts of crystals being used for anything was pretty woo-woo out there, right? And most definitely, even in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, people still laughed at people about crystals. And there are still some that would still laugh, but many, many more now recognize the ability of crystals to harness and to transmit energy. And they can be used for a variety of things, and everything has its own frequency. It's all about frequency when we understand what Tesla was saying. If you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of frequency, energy, vibration. And so things like crystals are able to amplify or change, augment different frequencies. So it's not crazy at all. This is all science that was understood in the past, was lost to most, but not all, because those in charge, they've known about all this the whole time. And so in order to get you guys to fear it, they characterize it as demonic. They characterize it as anti-God, anti-Christ. All these things are just evil spirits. Stay away from them. Be terrified of them, because we want to keep you in the dark. And we don't want you uncovering your power and your ability to change your reality, your ability to manifest a positive world. No, we want to keep you in the dark, is what these controllers have done. So they put fear around things. And so when you look at, say how the Catholic Church has developed, it developed basically by Constantine. How else can you keep an empire together? What better way than to rule the people as king, but also control their religious end? And so it's the same thing we see today with the jihadists that believe that if they go blow themselves up and kill 100 innocent people, they're going to have 40 virgins on the other side as wives, and they're going to be living in basically a paradise as their reward for a horrible act. And it's the same sort of mind control that's gone on for thousands of years. Keep people away from discovering who they really are, what they really are, their true power, their true ability to be unified. As we've quoted the Tower of Babel incident. Come, let us go down there. Look, the people are unified. They're building a city together in peace. And they will reach the heavens. They will have a civilization and a culture that will be like us. And we can't have that. So we have to go down and scatter them and send them into all these different warring fractional tribes that are always at war with each other. Keep them occupied with fighting each other. Keep them occupied with different philosophies, and religions. And when a prophet truly comes that can change everything, then let's figure out a way to keep them divided. And let's not let that true master that came through to give them true teachings of a higher spiritual nature, let's distort those teachings and let's get them arguing about the minutia, so that they'll argue about things like, oh, it must be a complete water immersion. You must go completely under when you're baptized. Otherwise, you're not saved. Or, you must be baptized at birth. Or, no, you must wait until you're of age and give your, full consent. And you must observe the Sabbath on Sunday. No, you must observe the Sabbath on Saturday. All these little things of minutia that don't really mean anything. They're not in the true spirit. The true spirit is one of love and compassion. And so, Cayce tapped into all that as well. And talked about the other civilizations that have been here on the planet, like Atlantis and Lemuria, which more and more people are believing existed all the time. And we see evidence of these advanced cultures that were here. Advanced cultures that had technology that was probably greater than our own. And they don't necessarily have to be ET cultures. They could have been human as well. Some people believe that there really are no ETs, that it's just simply leftover remnants of human cultures that are the ones controlling everything. And they're purely human, or perhaps slightly different with a few different genetic traits here and there. But still, they're the leftover remnants of Atlantis and some of the other civilizations where most of us have had a mind wipe because of what happens when the magnetosphere declines. The mind is tied right in to the Schumann resonance, as we know, and the mind is tied in right, totally to the magnetosphere. So when the magnetosphere declines to 10, 15, 20%, and the shift happens, there is the line of thought that we get amnesia. And we start over. Those of us that are left, those that are the survivors from the tsunamis, the tidal waves, the earthquakes, the volcanoes going off, and then the food shortages. There's always a remnant. And the thought is that because of the electromagnetic activity, it mind wipes us. But perhaps those that are in structures deep within the earth, as there are so many legends of these cultures and civilizations so deep within the earth, all around the globe, perhaps some of those are able to keep all their knowledge. Perhaps they have the technology to alleviate those issues, survive, and come out intact with all their technology. Can you imagine how advanced they would look to us? And how easily they'd be able to control the people on the surface. So this is all interesting conjecture, but Cayce did also predict that Atlantis must rise again. He also predicted a new field of science that would be developed based on psychic spiritual phenomenon. A shift in focus and study will occur. The world will give more weight to spiritual phenomena and less weight to the materialized or the material phenomena. This new field of spiritual science will become just as practical and as measurable as any other phase of human existence. He said a city of gold will be discovered in the Gobi Desert. It will have a temple with elevators, electric cars, and magical elements. He said New York State's East Coast and New York City itself will disappear. America's West Coast will be destroyed, and there'll be widespread destruction in Los Angeles and San Francisco, as well as in many portions of the West Coast. Land will appear off the coast of America. The Great Lakes will drain into the Gulf of Mexico through the Mississippi River. And here it's showing the U.S. Navy map. And there are so many maps that are associated. Really, when you get down to it, his was really the first one to come out. Since then, the U.S. Navy did their own study and came up with their own map, and there's been other people such as the, say, Gordon Michael Scallion, the I Am movement. There's been so many that talk about these Earthchanges, but really it all starts with Cayce. As you can see, he is the one that talked about the Mississippi and the Great Lakes, draining into the Gulf of Mexico, basically becoming more of an inland sea. Lots of changes. And then there's been so many of these maps that we see pop up that look very, very similar. And when I showed these before, there were some people that said, how could this over here, Utah and Nevada, be underwater? How's that possible? They're 5,000–6,000 feet high, in some places even higher. But there's evidence of tremendous cataclysms. There's evidence of tremendous upheaval. And some areas will actually literally crumble and head down, while other ones may rise and become new mountains. It appears that things can happen rather suddenly, such as, we've talked about the woolly mammoths with their food frozen in their bellies. They were flash frozen. And so most of these maps agree on a lot of things when you look at them, such as most of the East Coast along the coastlines are going to be underwater. Louisiana, pretty much all of Mississippi. And then when we look out west, California may become just islands. And there's going to be vast areas of the west that are totally underwater as well. And then there's new land that's going to be raising. So I'm not saying that you have to believe this. I always put things out there for you guys to make up your own mind on things. Just open up your mind and be open to changes. And I'm always open to changes as well as time goes on. So here you see another one. This was by Dr. Chet B. Snow. And it's showing the new Atlantis, just like what Cayce was talking about. And this is rather large. And of course we see the middle part of the country. Many have said that the United States is going to be split in two. So that after the changes, you're not going to be able to take a land mass and travel from one side to the other. You're going to have to do it by boat. As we see, this is Gordon Michael Scallion's future map of the United States. Most of these are pretty agreeable. Now Colorado, in some of them, is mostly good, and some it's like half gone. Same thing with Arizona. New Mexico stays stable. And then many have also seen a Chinese and Russian attack on the United States, which I've covered in other videos as well. There have been so many people that have talked about that, as this map is showing area of Chinese and Russian occupation. Interesting years. And you can see this one is not up to date because 2016, 2017, we're not quite there yet. Although with the flooding that's happening right now, maybe it was just a few years off. And yet another one. And so here are some Edgar Cayce's 7 prophecies that came true. He predicted the stock market crash in 1929. So in February 1925, during a life reading for a 26-year-old physician, Cayce stated the young doctor would soon find himself in possession of a great deal of money. The reading advised the individual to exercise caution and discretion in caring for his wealth, especially in the face of the adverse forces that will come then in 1929. So this is 4 years before it happened, or over 4 years. In another occasion in March 1929, 6 months before the stock market crashed, a New York stockbroker was given a severe warning of the impending great disturbance in financial circles that was about to take place. Cayce stated, "We may expect a considerable break and a bear market. See? The issue being between those of reserves of nations and individuals, and will cause, unless another of the more stable banking conditions come to the relief, a great disturbance in the financial circles. This warning has been given." So World War II in 1935, in an amazing display of precognitive perception, Edgar Cayce warned a 29-year-old freight agent of catastrophic events that were building within the international community. In response to a question regarding global affairs, the readings described an entire world at war. Although not seeing the picture as necessarily an unchangeable destiny, Cayce warned that tendencies in the hearts and souls of men are such that these conditions could be brought about. As to the affairs of the international nature, these we find are in a condition of great anxiety on the part of many, not only as individuals but as to nations. And the activities that have already begun have assumed such proportions that there is to be an attempt upon the part of groups to penalize or to make for the association of groups to carry on the same. This will make for the taking of sides, as it were, by various groups or countries or governments. This will be indicated by the Austrians, Germans, and later the Japanese joining in their influence unseen, and gradually growing to those affairs where there must become, as it were, an almost direct opposition to which has been the theme of the Nazis, quote-unquote, the Aryan, parentheses. For this will gradually make for a growing of animosities, and unless there is interference from what may be called by many the supernatural forces and influences that are active in the affairs of nations and people. That's interesting. So there are supernatural forces and influence active in the affairs of nations and peoples. The whole world, as it will be set on fire by the militaristic groups and those that are for power and expansion in such associations, obviously in reference to World War II. And 3, pole shift. What great change, or the beginning of what change, if any, is to take place in the earth from 2000 to 2001 AD? His answer was, when there is a great shifting of the poles or a new cycle begins. And this was given August 11th, 1936. And so we know now that we are in a pole shift, and he talked about that. And we know the magnetic field is dissipating. So Cayce indicated that the pole shift would become apparent in 2000 to 2001. And the Nova show right here, and I have all the links for you guys, that was shown in that time frame, also revealed that shift has indeed begun in the South Atlantic Ocean, where we have the South Atlantic anomaly. I know most of you guys are familiar about that. And so here the north-south polarity is fluctuating back and forth, weakening the shield against solar radiation. And so he did talk about that. And then he gave a reading in 1929, and this is about the convergence of communications companies. He also spoke about the life of the Essenes, and now we have many scholars agreeing that yes, Jesus was an Essene. And the Essenes were a group of basically people that lived in communes, is really what they did. They shared everything. They stayed apart from society for the most part. And that would explain a lot of the differences between the Pharisees and the Sadducees and Jesus' take, because we know he condemned them. And he was not for the way things were running. He didn't think that the teachings were being given in the proper light and that people were living the way they should. And so this is fascinating as well. And so he got into the fact of who the Essenes were before we even really knew a lot about them. And blood used as a diagnostic tool, so this was way ahead of his time as well. And he even spoke about La Nina and El Nino. So things that we were just talking about this morning. And he talked about a lot of other things as well. So really interesting. He did foresee the possibility of a third world war. He spoke of strife arising near the Davis Straits and in Libya, Egypt, in Ankara, and in Syria, and also in the straits around the areas of Australia, the Indian Ocean, and the Persian Gulf. And so it's interesting. He did talk about a day of reckoning, and he talked about the second coming and things of those light as well, and new discoveries in astronomy as well. He did speak about the ocean level rising as well. And as we had said before, with the shifting of the Earth's magnetic poles that began in, he's saying in 1998, will come a gradual melting of the polar ice caps and eventually cause inundations of many coastal regions, resulting in a drop in the land masses by about 30 feet. In 1941, Cayce elaborated on this effect as to the conditions in the geography of the world, of the country. Changes here are gradually coming about, for many portions of the East Coast will be disturbed, as well as many portions of the West Coast, as well as the central portion of the U.S. And then, in the next few years, lands will appear in the Atlantic as well as the Pacific. And what is the close coastline now of many a land will be the bed of an ocean. Even many battlefields of the present will be ocean, will be seas. The bays, the lands over which, interestingly enough, the New World Order will carry on their trade as one with another. Interesting that he uses those words, the New World Order. So what do you guys make of that term? You know, the first time that we hear it in our modern terms was way back with Poppy Bush. And he talks about a new world order. And these are the exact words that Cayce uses. Very interesting, don't you think? Now, the many battlefields, that's Europe, because if you look at the maps, and let me see if I have that one. Nope. Okay, there was another one, which I will dig up for you guys, which shows the world itself. And basically, Europe is kind of gone. Just about all of Europe is underwater, according to what he saw. And it was going to happen very, very quickly. And so I have all these things for you as well. Here are some prophecies that are yet to come. And one of them that is interesting is the whole idea of root races, because he has said there's been many different root races of man. And what's coming is basically an evolutionary occurrence that would mark a new age and a new understanding of humanity's relationship to God. So again, hinting at the fact that we are changing, and what's going to be the new humanity is going to be very different than the old humanity. We are all going to have, and all those of us that make it through these times will have heightened perceptive abilities, a far greater sense of spirituality, a greater oneness and connectedness to everything. And that's part of the readings. He does talk about these halls, halls of records that are going to be discovered, and 3 halls of records to be discovered. And so talking about our hidden history that has been hidden from us on purpose. And so in Bimini, in Egypt, and the Yucatan. And we've talked about this. We've talked about the fact that we know that there's hollow places under the Sphinx. And this is what Cayce talked about. And they've been keeping this from the world. They have been keeping this from the world. They don't want it coming out. And here is that map I was looking for. So you see the greater picture, and you see land. And I've seen other ones. Oh, yeah, you can see just a little bit of it down here. Huge land in the Pacific. And basically Atlantis coming back up. And if we look at Europe, there's very little of Europe left. Europe is mostly gone when we look at this. You know, there's just a little bit of an island in Italy. There's a bigger piece of island, like down around Corsica. I guess this would be around that area. We see Spain and Portugal. They're just islands now. Switzerland's an island. Germany's an island. There's a little island of the Czech Republic. And just a portion of the UK is left, with the Highlands of Scotland and a tiny bit of Ireland. And we see Scandinavia. So huge changes here. Huge changes here. And we see so much of Indonesia is gone. But then New Zealand is huge. The landmass it develops there, it's basically like another continent. And we get a whole new continent over here, like Lemuria rises. And huge changes in South America, with some new land coming out. And Africa is really split up into different portions. So a totally different globe to look at, for sure. And then recognize too that we might turn this on its side, because it could be that the new equator is going to run like straight down through here. We don't know. So that's up in the air, as all this is. It's just conjecture, and it's just what he saw. And so there are some good PDFs I have for you guys as well. So this is just talking about some of the prophecies. See, America will maintain the balance of power in the world. That is true. America has dominated for a long time now. And there's a lot that have yet to be fulfilled, including war in the Persian Gulf and other areas, possibly World War III. Major discoveries in human origins to be found. China will become the cradle of Christianity. Volcanic activity, and it goes on. Ocean levels rising, devastation coastlines. Earthchanges is going to destroy a lot of areas as well. So it's pretty interesting, and included, he did talk about the return of the Jews to Israel. And again, that was after he died that happened. And so here is a PDF all about Edgar Cayce and his readings on healing. And there's a lot more here talking about interpreting the earth change readings and cyclones, quakes, and tsunamis. So for you guys to go more in depth, there's a couple full books here. Cayce on Atlantis, more on his prophecies. And what I want to talk about was, part of what he was really talking about was, what's going to come out of all this is the fact that humanity is going to start to come back together and recognize the greater oneness that is behind everything, because we've lost that. And that is how we have been able to be manipulated and basically able to be kept at each other's throats all the time, because we're arguing about minutia, and because we're looking at everybody else and saying they have the wrong ideology, they have the wrong philosophy, they have the wrong religion. There's only one way. And what we have to recognize is the oneness through diversity. That is one of the greatest things that will come about. At the end, after we go through these changes and all these changes, we're going to have to unify. We're going to have to pull together, and there will be a new awakening that's coming. And we're all connected. We are all connected. And, that's the lesson that we have to get. And Cayce talked about that, the greater oneness and the greater harmony. And so, there's many people that have different views on different things. Obviously, there's so many different religions. We've touched on that. I mean, when you talk about Christianity in and of itself, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of different types of Christianity out there. And so we need to focus more on what the original message was. And it's all about compassion, love, harmony, peace, brotherhood. We need to stop judging each other and just simply keep lifting each other up. We need to work together. We need to get past our differences and embrace the differences as a beautiful thing. It's wonderful that we have diversity. It's wonderful, and as a foodie, as somebody that's a foodie and somebody that loves to travel, I give thanks for that diversity. There's nothing better. I love checking out all different types of restaurants and cultures. It's beautiful. I love to immerse myself fully in those things. And I think it's wonderful and beautiful. And so we need to get past that. Simply accept the differences, learn to love and trust each other, and move together in oneness. So that is how we're going to move past this. That's how we're going to get through all these things together. And so he talked about that, and he didn't say the world was going to completely end. His vision was quite the opposite, that this is just a stage. This is a transition, a transitory period, and actually what comes is better. Again, all these traditions, what comes is better than what is. What comes is at a higher level, and truly we can manifest that heaven on earth. Because, we need to go through this. This is a purging. This is a cleansing. Look at what's going on with the structure of the world. Look at what's going on with the structure of the planet. We talked about that whale that had 88 pounds of plastic in its stomach. This world's been dominated by consumerism and greed, which has been pushed on us, really, and it's been cultivated to create that mindset of me, ego, consumerism, and that whole needing and wanting more, which basically leads us into a state of cultivating the ego, losing sight of the oneness behind everything, and missing the boat. That's where we've missed the great truth of all the perennial traditions, all these great teachers, all these great prophets that have come down throughout time. They're all trying to teach us about love, compassion, and unity and acceptance. And somehow, it always ends up that there are these forces, and we could say it's just pure ego. We could put a different label on it. We could call it, some of these groups that have found that they could take advantage of humanity and benefit off of humanity's weakness, and by simply creating division and keeping humanity split amongst itself enables them to have higher profits, to live high on the hog, to live their idealistic life, which is not one of peace, harmony, brotherhood, and love, and quite the opposite. It's one of taking advantage of greed, of not caring about the environment or your fellow humanity. And the earth is showing the signs of what that brings to all of us right now. And so we have lived as a virus on the earth. And so, as I've said before, what happens when there's an invading virus in the body? The white blood cells are called to attack that virus, and all these calamities will arise. But we can change that. That's one of the things in Cayce's readings that he was strong about. He said, if you just even had, it's very biblical. He quoted basically, if you remember, before Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, and Lot was like speaking to God and saying, what if there's the angel of God? What if there's just 100 good people? What if there's just 10 good people? And at that point, yes, if there's just 10 good people, destruction wouldn't have come. And it's the same thing with our consciousness. From the studies, we know that meditation, even by just 100 or 1,000 people in a city of hundreds of thousands or millions, can change drastically the crime rate. We have tremendous power, especially when we focus together. And so if humanity could draw together and focus on positivity, good outcomes, on really changing things, because it starts with a thought, and then it becomes an action, and then it becomes contagious. Then perhaps we don't have to go through the worst of these earth changes, and things can be changed. And yes, many of these things are not natural, and yes, many of these things are perhaps orchestrated. But even so, if we stand up and demand and are vocal and come together, we can still force change. We have to say, no, I am not accepting this anymore. We have to say that as a unified group, and we have to have these groups spread so that more and more people are saying the same thing, and we're taking these politicians that have been lifelong politicians and we're kicking them out, and we're breaking up these corporate conglomerates, and we're forcing them to retreat. We can do that. We can boycott. We can completely boycott these nasty companies of the world that are destroying the world. And we can also do such things as working together locally to demand change and to create change and to get out of the system. For the system is what needs to be changed, and that starts with one person at a time at the heart level, and then it will spread. So my friends, as always, I look forward to your comments. Please do subscribe, join our family, click the bell, get all the notifications, and share. Let's keep waking people up, because we can make the change that we want to see. God bless, my friends. Namaste.